And Michael O'Hanlon joins us now. He is a senior fellow and director of research and foreign policy at the Brookings Institution. Michael, welcome. So how do you read this truce from Russia, and could it open the door for permanent ceasefire President Trump is pushing for?
It could, Jenna, but it's unlikely, or it seems unlikely based on what we can see of Vladimir Putin's calculus. He does seem to still think time is on his side. I can't prove that, but he does know he has a bigger defense industry than Ukraine's, 4 times the population. And probably he thinks he has 10 times the attention span of any of the rest of us, especially on this issue, which matters so much to him, getting as much of Ukraine as he can and making sure he dominates Ukrainian politics in the future so that Ukraine will always be closer to Russia, or at least neutral, rather than being part of the West or part of NATO. I think those goals remain very important for him, and he would like to have more Ukrainian land and even more binding assurances that Ukraine will never join a Western institution like NATO. However, I could be wrong, and it's possible that Putin will at some point just decide, I've got 20% of Ukraine. I sort of wanted all of it, or at least a quarter of it, but I've got a fifth of it. And the United States is acknowledging that Crimea is now mine for good. And, also President Trump's perhaps willing to lift some sanctions and get us back into the international economic marketplace, if we agree to a truce. And so you could imagine Putin deciding that's sort of good enough. I think it's less likely. But that's the way you have to evaluate your question, Jenna, because Putin's not thinking in terms of 2- and 3-day truces. He's thinking in terms of long-term objectives. Yeah. And any truce is a tactic, probably more for public relations and diplomacy than for an actual effort to find a peace deal. But we'll have to see.
Yeah. Michael, what would a real enforceable ceasefire need to look like to have any credibility on the ground?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's going to be enforced by anybody except Russians and Ukrainians. It might be monitored by others, and there might be some limited degree of foreign troop presence, although Russia's pretty firmly against that, too, when the British and the French have suggested a small European reassurance force on Ukrainian territory. But I think the enforcement is going to come from keeping Ukraine well supplied and economically viable, maintaining a military that can be rapidly mobilized, even if we've reached a peace. So something on the Israel model or the South Korea model, where you have a very large and pretty well-trained reserve component that can be quickly brought up to speed into the front lines. And then ideally, there would in fact be the ability to bring some Western help to Ukraine's military assistance, but I doubt that's going to be in the cards for any deal that seems to be in discussion right now. So the final piece for enforcement, again, it's not enforcement, it's incentives. You have to have a situation where Russia knows if it were to attack Ukraine again in the future, that we would come back at it even harder with economic punishment, and that it would essentially be even more ostracized from the world economy than it has been this time. I think that plus the strong Ukrainian military are going to have to be the 2 chief elements that uphold any armistice.
Just about 30 seconds left, but the U.S. wants to get a deal done quickly. Does that weaken the U.S. position? Does it give the U.S. less leverage in coming to terms?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, the problem is President Trump seems to have his attention waning, and that could certainly weaken our leverage. But if we say to Vladimir Putin, and President Trump seems to be coming to this recognition that Putin's the problem. A lot of us have felt that for a long time, but President Trump seems to be coming to that conclusion. And if he's going to keep supporting Ukraine with military and economic assistance and keeping economic pressure on Russia, even if the negotiations, go off the rails for a while or just stop altogether for a while, that could still work out okay. So it's going to be a test of where President Trump goes next with his policy.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Jenna.